For me, I think it comes down to three areas. Firstly, it's that solid bedrock of a foundation of evidence. You provide us with something there which says this is some hard evidence from out there in the field, and therefore you can sort of cut off at source. Oh, we're not sure it's quite that or that. No, here's some hard evidence. We can do it there. Secondly, I gain a great discussion partner for what might work and almost work with you on live research, because what we do at Wesleyan, you can sort of take into your data bank. You also then come to my third one. You introduce us to others doing the same items. Then, so for me, you're the center of the hub. You provide us with the foundation. I then do various things based on that. Share with you. We bounce ideas around. Say, what about that? Have you seen that? Oh yes, Roger. But this organisation over here is doing that. So you introduce me to others there. So I think you act as a sort of facilitator and enabler for me to do my work there. And conscious of the question which has come up, the sort of difference between social imperative and business good, for me, we need to work together, because from the pure research space that you might be in to my pure business space, there's clearly a link, a Venn diagram overlap, if I call it that. I think between us, we can try and work out where that is there. And also it helps you get your research more finely attuned to what business might need. And also for me to take business into a space where we need to be. And in the diversity space, just be very clear, why are we doing it? It's a social good, I clearly accept that. Well, I'm in Birmingham, the most diverse city in Europe, 50% BAME population there. If you wander around the business area, as Kieran well knows, you'd never guess that. It's pale, male and stale, to use my famous phrase. And basically, we just need to work on that, because otherwise, long term, we are going to have a big problem on people. So this, to me, is help the local people, populace do better things, and helping us do better things. So it's a win-win all round, but it's going to be a long journey. So I think that's where it comes in there.
How does research impact? I think we can, from my perspective, doing work on sort of health and social care, I would always be aspiring for my research to have impact, both in terms of influencing policy, and sometimes a single project would turn a government department's policy on something, but that doesn't always happen. Sometimes it's about an accumulation of evidence. But we know that research we do might influence individual commissioners, service managers, practitioners. But I don't think we should forget also, in my area of work, about the value of evidence to individual service users, and how empowering that can be for them, either to know that their experience is similar to other people's, but also how they can use evidence to drive forward change in their local communities, and the power of an independent academic piece of work that they then take to decision makers in their locality to say, we need to change this for me and for others like me. So I think there's a huge number of layers, I suppose, in which you can use evidence to have impact.
I think it's a really important and timely question, given the kind of world we are living in at the moment. And I think there are three things that I would say. First of all is marshal the evidence. You have to put that evidence to work. It's not always about doing more research. And so from my experience of working on the Leadership Commission report, which was about, how do we tackle racism in meaningful ways to open up institutions to create, better and throughput and pipelines. So one is engage the relevant stakeholders, but collaboratively. And by stakeholders, I don't just mean business. I mean community leaders, I mean business leaders, and I mean universities. And so that's the first point. Work on the issue rather than on the perception, because that's really, really important. The second part of that is utilize that research in that collective collaborative way. Roger talked about it wasn't simply one business. One business led to a second business that led to a third business that led to community groups, that led to faith groups coming together to work collectively. So there is something in the power of the collective to create change. I talked about creating a movement, and it's in that collective movement that you're able to then begin to kind of influence and shape practice. And the third is make sure that out of that, you have got concrete actions and plans that you are able to see and measure, within the given period agreed within those kind of partnerships. these are deep-rooted issues. There are no quick fix solutions, but often it's the most complex things that are the hardest to grapple with, but we have to grasp the nettle, and I think the work that we did, through the Leadership Commission has made a real difference, and it has begun that process of tackling some of those institutional systems, processes and infrastructures that are now making a real difference, but not just to those businesses, but to the lives of those communities where those individuals reside.
And I suppose I was thinking of it perhaps at a sort of micro level around, for any research that we do, is to be very deliberate about within that piece of research, how are we addressing and looking at issues of race, for example, in terms of people's experiences of using health or social care services. But before that, it's about the involvement of all relevant groups in conceiving and designing research and seeking the views of what are the priorities. And I think in my area, something we grappled with a lot in the 90s, where we were doing research on disabled people rather than with disabled people. And that huge shift that happened during, I think, that decade about recognition of our place as researchers.
If the question is nobody listens unless there's money involved, then I would disagree. I don't think that is the answer. That you've got to have both. We do know that just going off on a tangent, we know that a lot of the kind of corporate responsibility programs that businesses put into place don't work unless there is a profit motive behind it. In the same way that, in the bigger picture, everything that we do in social care has got to make sure it's affordable for everybody, whether that's funded through government or privately. So the social good piece goes hand in hand with the business imperative. They have to make sense together, otherwise it won't go anywhere. I don't see them as separate, Paul, I think is the answer, which is why I'm struggling with the question.
It's often the case that if you're doing something which is for the social good, then you will also have a business advantage. And that becomes clear, and your customers also trust you more as a result of that. So I think there's a balance to be struck. Your products, your services become better. You can also champion the fact that you are doing things for social good, and it's not an empty claim. So I think being able to have that evidence base behind you turns it from being an empty claim of social good to a business imperative, which you can really defend.
We've talked about social good and we've talked about business imperative. Can they work hand in hand?
They have to. I think it's as all of us have been saying, conversation, and we can get there. I think if business operates independent of social imperative, there will be a divide which will get worse, and that is not good, full stop. So I think all of us in business need to work out why we're in business for, what's the social imperative and how it gets there. So for me, they have to work hand in hand, because one without the other doesn't work. There's no, we are united, and we can't just, social's over here and business is here and we'll do our own path. No, that will just cause greater divisions and greater challenges, not just for the social place, but for the business as well. So for me, they work hand in hand.
For us, as a team of researchers in our research unit who are doing research on social care, if we didn't engage with business, then any work we did on home care, which is principally provided by businesses, sometimes contracted by local authorities, would be totally out of touch with the main provider of home care.
For us, the Lloyds Register Foundation is a charity, but it owns the Lloyds Register Group, which does assurance and is a very large player in this space. So although the charity's aims are to support safety of life and infrastructure, their business is also in that space. So there is a very clear business imperative for the Lloyds Register Group to understand the research which is coming through. We are very independent of that business unit. but it has implications on what happens to them in the future. We also influence regulations and policy in the space of robotics and autonomous systems, which in turn influences businesses. So it's not a direct link for us, but it's very much there. And there's no tension for us in that respect, because there's a clear need for the research to inform business changes. It's always going to be that way, I think. We are not creating any new barriers. What we're doing is enabling the technology to be adopted just in a safe way.
I like your phrase earlier on about academia being a critical friend. I think it's really important as a business. We are here to make money, but we're also here to look after people. But if we want to influence, it's important that we can do that with independence and authority. And we can't do that if we're not working with an independent partner. And that's one of the key things here is to nobody believes a business when they just talk about stuff they bring that they develop themselves as a business, because they know there's a profit motive behind it. It's really important that you bring together a group of people who are not just there to make money, but there for the social good. We are a very values driven business, instead, and we see the value in working with an independent academic partner to help us speak with authority and influence at the highest levels. And that's really what we're trying to achieve.
You need to think about it before you even start the research, and that you've planned that in from the beginning, and it's not an afterthought in the last 6 months of a study. That before you even start, you've identified who your audiences are going to be or are, and how they will need to receive your research. What's the nature of the output that will be meaningful and salient to them, and which they will then be able to act on. And I think it's also about being committed after studies have finished to continuing to sort of contribute and respond to stakeholders when they approach you for support, individual discussions. So yeah, it's something that's absolutely core from the moment of conceiving.
I think we agree about planning it early and engaging with the people you want to partner with to make that impact right from the start. Letting people know what you're doing and what you're thinking about early on means that they can also be thinking about how that fits and helping you change your project as you go along. Your project often isn't fixed or not completely fixed. And so having a little bit of flexibility within it so that you can change to be more impactful as you go is really helpful. For us, we are a 5-year programme, and at the end of year 3, as we're approaching now, we've got some CPD programmes which are up and running. So having different things that you can do in order to embed some of that impact early on is a really useful way to think about it. It's not just about the final results, it's about the things that you discover as you go along.
I was just going to add one other point, which is make sure that when you're setting it up, you understand the time scale, and that understanding that by the time you finish, what you're doing is still got to be relevant. You see so many projects at universities that take so long to set up, and by the time they're done, the technology has moved on, and it's irrelevant. It's actually making sure that when you not only build up your communication plan with the people you're looking to influence, but make sure the questions you're asking are going to be relevant in 2 years' time, 3 years' time, 5 years' time. So it's understanding the time scale of what you're doing and making sure you're picking the right thing to do. And that's really important. So don't go for short-term stuff. Make sure that it's the bigger, longer-term stuff that it will be relevant by the time you finish pulling everything together.
I call it critical by design. I absolutely agree with Bryony. If you're thinking about it in the middle or at the end, it's too late. It has to be critical by design at the forefront of your thinking. And also think about the type of impact, because, impact is such a big word and can mean so many different things. Are you thinking about cultural impact? Are you thinking about economic impact? Are you thinking about policy impact? Or are you thinking about a combination of those? Because impact can be instrumental as well, So I think it's really important as part of the critical by design stage, you're giving some thought, not individually, but kind of collectively. And the second point I'd want to make is, don't always think of the usual suspects. Sometimes when we are thinking about co-designing projects, we reach out to those that we are familiar with. And sometimes the answer lies with those that we are unfamiliar with, new partnerships, So just try and extend your reach and your engagement beyond, you know, those that you are familiar with.
I'm quite happy to be approached any way that's appropriate. As long as it's substantial and it's thought through what's in it from both sides. As long as some of the groundwork has been done, I'm happy to engage with anybody, I think is the answer to that question.